For this project, I'm taking a roll of shipping paper, which came from the Dollar Tree, and I'm ripping a section off. And I'm going to use the paper to cover this vase that I also found at the Dollar Tree and loved the ridges on it. I measured how long I wanted the paper against the height of the vase, but do end up making them shorter. And again, I'm ripping the paper down instead of cutting it, and you'll see why here in just a minute. Once I have all of my paper ripped up, I'm taking a bowl and adding skull glue and water. So now we can cover the vase with the paper. I dip each strip of paper into the glue water mixture and then use my fingers to get any excess glue off of the paper. I want this vase to look like paper mache, and I saw a similar one from a high-end retailer online. This is why you want to rip the paper instead of cut it. When you rip, the fibers of the paper are exposed and will blend together a little more seamlessly compared to when you cut with scissors and get those harsh edges that will just show up on your project. I made a paper mache dough bowl a few months back where I didn't rip the paper, I cut it, and I definitely wish I would have ripped it. Because of the ridges on this vase, I really had to mold the paper over each line and press it down while smoothing it out to make sure there were no air bubbles trapped underneath. Like I mentioned, I did end up making the strips a little shorter because it was too difficult to shape the paper around the neck of the vase. So after covering the bottom of the vase, I took smaller pieces to add around the neck and then curled them inside of the opening. And I set the vase aside to dry overnight. Once the paper was dry, I'm taking sandpaper along the inside rim to remove any excess paper, and by sanding in one motion going inside of the vase, the paper easily peels off perfectly all around the lip. I really wanted to keep that brown paper look, but to make it a little more high-end, I'm taking white paint to dry brush over the whole thing. I added a heavy dry brush line over each ridge on the vase, and then with the remaining paint on my brush, went in between, but made sure to still leave that brown showing through. And that's it for this one. It was super easy to create and would only cost $3 if you had to buy all of these supplies. I have been seeing these hanging planters all over my Pinterest feed for the last few months and finally decided I need to make one. So I'm taking one of these nesting boxes from the Dollar Tree along with two medium-sized wreath rings that I got from Walmart. I have seen these at Dollar Tree, but not recently. I do have a whole Christmas video using the Dollar Tree ones for even more ideas. To attach the rings to the box, I'm grabbing my bronze eye pins from this variety pack. I will need 4 of these as well as 4 bronze jump rings. I got both of these from Amazon and will link them in my description box. Next, I found where I wanted the rings to sit on the sides of the box and marked where the screw would go and then added the eye pins. It was a little difficult to get them started. I ended up taking a small nail and hammered it so the screw would have kind of a pilot hole. And then you want to make sure the hook part is facing horizontal rather than vertical. Once both eye pins were screwed in on one side, I added the jump rings into the hook and then attached the wreath ring before closing up the jump rings. And then repeated this process of adding the eye pins, jump rings, and wreath ring to the other side of the box. Now, the wreath rings will not automatically lean into each other, so to get that look, I'm using 2mm macrame cord. You could use jute twine, yarn, whatever you have, but I glued the starting end of the cord to the ring using my Starbond super glue. I would not recommend using hot glue here if you want the project to hold up over time. Then I wrapped the center of the rings together as long as I wanted it to be, and then glued the end back down. You could stop here, add a hanger, and be done. I wanted to add a little bit more detail to the top, so I took this wood ring, also from Amazon. All of my Amazon products will be linked below for you, but to attach it, I glued it down first to hold it in place, and then I wrapped more macrame cord around it a few times. I think my camera died for that part though. I also added a few wood beads in various sizes to another cord that would be the hanger. And to finish it off, I'm adding a loop and a wrap. So to make the wrap, create a loop as long as you want it for the very top where you will put it on a hook. Then take a separate cord and place it on top of the loop, making sure the end is sticking up, and then create a second loop going the opposite direction with the loose cord and make it longer than you want your wrap section to be. Now wrap all of the cords together. When you have it as long as you want, take the end of the wrapping cord and put it through the bottom loop. Then go back to the top loop, pull that cord tight. This will create a knot and conceal the knot inside of the wrap for a nice clean look. Now cut off the loose ends and that's it. Stick a plant in the box, hang it up and enjoy. I created this little plant nook when I made my living room built-ins and I love the way it's coming together. Let me know what you think about this project. So I have this wire wreath form. Is it a wreath form? I don't know, wire hoop that I got from the Dollar Tree, and it just has this welcome word across the center of it. So I took my wire cutters and just snipped it right off, and it came off pretty easily. For that second one, I just twisted it around a few times and that snapped it off. I don't know why I didn't use my wire cutters there. I mean, I had them sitting right there. But anyways, then I'm taking this metallic spray paint. It is in a antique brass color and just spray painted my hoop. While that's drying, I am picking out my yarn colors. So I ended up going with that light tan color, the camel color, that green, and then also black and white. I was debating on the navy, but I didn't end up liking that. I liked the green a little bit better instead. So then I'm just going to cut down all of my yarns, and I cut way too many because I had a different plan when I started this, but I just cut them to about 4 feet each. And then I took my white, the tan, and the camel color, and I started making a braid. So you'll see here that I have 2 of each color there, but I ended up redoing that with only 1 strand of each color because this ended up being a little bit too thick. Once I had all of my yarns cut, I'm just going to start looping them through my hoop. So this particular hoop has that hanger on the back of it, the metal one, and it is like welded onto that. So I just used it to my advantage for the center of my wall hanging, and I put my first strand through that hanger on the back. So I'm going to show you several times and get very close on exactly what I'm doing, but I want you to see it first before I try to explain it, I guess. So we're going to start wrapping the yarns around the bottom as well to create a second knot so that these stay in place. So the way that I'm creating this, I'm taking my strand, I separated them at the bottom after I created my lark's head, and then I am wrapping it around one side, wrapping it around the next side, and then pulling the end of the string through that loop. Don't worry, I am going to show you this several more times, and I'm going to get real nice and close for you. But I started out with my white strands, and I added 3 of these. And then I moved on to adding on my braided piece, and it's just 1 of the braid. And I'm going to do the same thing here, create my lark's head knot at the top, put my strands underneath of my hoop. I think I do it backwards there. Maybe not. Okay, anyways, I don't know what I did there, but here you can see I'm creating my lark's head knot. So you pull your strings through the loop that you put underneath of the wire form and then pull that tight. I know I just explained that's super weird, but there are so many other videos on how to create a lark's head knot. It is the simplest macrame knot. So then you take both of the ends of your string and you put them underneath of the wire hoop, and then we're going to separate them. So now I'm taking the end and I'm wrapping it around the hoop on the left side of my stationary strand, and I'm just going to loop it around and pull it tight. Then I'm taking that same end and I'm pulling it around the right side, but this time I'm going to pull the end of my yarn through that loop that we just created, and this is what is going to create that knot at the bottom of your wall hanging. I don't even know what that knot is called. I'm sure there's a technical name for it. But I'm going to continue to do this, adding on my green strings, and then I'm going to add on a set of my black. So I have 3 white, 1 of the braid, and then 3 of the black. So once I have those on, now we're going to move on to the other side. And this time I'm going to start with my black and we're going to work our way backwards. And that's what's going to give us that kind of design. And I am just putting my black strand just straight over top of that first set that we made. And it's just going to create a little diagonal. I'm going to add on 3 more of my black strands and then go on to my green. And this time I am going to add some beads on to the green strand, the very first green strand. And these are 10mm beads, and I just string them along until I get to the very bottom. And I did want to make sure this was nice and tight so that my beads were not going to sag from being a little bit heavier. And then I'm just going to do the same thing at the bottom, creating my knot, but this time I'm making sure that that one is super tight just so that my beads don't start to sag. And then I'm just going to work my way backwards, adding my green, adding my braid, and then adding my white. Once all of my yarns are added to the hoop, I just take a dowel rod, a really long one that I just had laying around, and I held it up to create a diagonal so I know where I want to cut my strings. I did skip over the braids because I wanted to tie the knot a little bit higher so that I could just cut it off at the knot. And that was it for this piece. It was actually really easy, even though I know I explained it a little bit complicated, I'm sure, but it really was not hard at all to create. And it only took me about maybe 20 minutes once I had all of my yarns cut. That was the most time-consuming part. I'm taking this little bathtub that I found at the Dollar Tree. It's just one of those little dollhouse bathtubs, and this is another part of that Walmart stencil that had like 3 sheets and different designs in it, and I'm just using the little hexagon part. So I'm taping down the spot that I want. I didn't want to fill in the whole thing, and I wanted to make a raised stencil here. So I'm just taking some joint compound that is still left over from my bathroom. Like, look how much I still have to use. And I'm just smoothing it on the areas that I wanted it to be. Then I'm going to lift that up and we're going to let it dry. I did put a few different little spots of the little hexagon shape around my bathtub. I didn't cover the back. I only did like the front and then like a little on the back and a little on the front because you're not going to see the back of it. And I didn't want to risk messing it up trying to do the back side. So once that dried, I'm taking my fawn paint again and I'm going to paint the whole thing. After the fawn color was dry, I do take some white chalk paint or ivory chalk paint and I dry brush a little heavier over top of those hexagons so that they stand out more. And then I do just a very light dry brushing around the rest of it. I do paint the inside like a little bit, you can see there. I didn't paint the whole thing because we are going to fill it up with some greenery. So I took some, what is that called? Floral foam, put it in the bottom, covered that with some moss. And then I'm taking, this is eucalyptus. It's from Walmart. It looks so beautiful, so high end, but I actually think it looks a little more like boxwood. I don't know. Let me know what you think.
But here's a look at how it turned out. Again, this is in my bathroom, and I cannot wait to share that renovation reveal with you because it looks so good. For this first project, I am taking these little wedding table topper signs you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I am just removing the little stand parts off the back. This was not difficult to remove at all, just a little bit of pressure and they popped right off. And then I did sand down the back so that it was nice and smooth. Next, I'm taking this wallpaper that my husband's old boss was just throwing away. She had 2 huge rolls of it, and of course he thought I could do something with it, so he brought it home for me. So I'm just measuring out how long I need to cover one of these little pieces, and we are going to make a little fence. So I wanted the planks of the wallpaper to completely cover the little fence piece. Like, I didn't want there to be a seam, how you can see like the wood pieces kind of fitting together there. So I wanted it to look like it was one solid piece. So I cut those strips out, and then I'm taking some Mod Podge, laying it down all over the front of this sign. And then I'm going to take one of the strips of wallpaper and we're going to put it right down on top. And I smoothed this down nice and good to make sure there were no little bubbles or anything underneath the wallpaper. And then to top it off with another coat of Mod Podge to seal it all in. Once that was all dried, I took my X-Acto knife and just cut right around our fence piece, cutting off any excess wallpaper, and there's our little fence. To put it all together, I did paint the back of this with some mineral chalk paint and then used 2 giant craft sticks to hot glue everything together. Next, I'm taking these little terracotta pots. These are the smallest ones that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I did cut them in half. So my husband helped me with this part. He took his grinder in the garage and very carefully and slowly, I did speed this up a little bit, so he was going really slow. He helped me to cut these right in half. Then I'm just taking some E6000 to attach them to my fence part. I don't know if hot glue would have worked here. I didn't try it since they're a little heavier. I wanted to make sure this would stay down on our fence and not fall off over time. So once I had those glued down, I am taking some burlap that I have and just cutting it down to fit around the front of my little terracotta pot. And then I pulled some of the little strings out to make it look frayed and a little bit more rustic. Make sure to wear your finger protectors here, as that hot glue will come right through the burlap. For a finishing touch, I just took some jute twine, made a little bow, and hot glued that right onto the front of my pots. Oh, I didn't show it, I don't know why, but I just added some succulents and some little florals into my terracotta pots there. And then I thought it needed something a little extra, so I took some Waverly wax again and just dry brushed all around the edges. And that was it for this one. This was so easy and it turned out so cute. You could also add like something to the bottom of this fence or like to the top right if you wanted to add like a little stencil or a little word or welcome or whatever you wanted. You could make this so adorable for your home. Oh, and my husband was a little upset with me that the Rubik's Cube was not solved in his grinder part, so he had to make sure to get that in as a solve.
For this project, I'm taking 2 blocks and gluing them end to end and creating 8 sets like this. You'll see here there are 3 blocks, but I ended up changing that, and I also made 4 sets of 6 blocks glued end to end. So I'm making a lantern here and realized I made assembling it harder than it needed to be. I thought it would be easiest to put the 4 sides together first, so I took 2 of the 3 block pieces. I didn't cut the 3rd block off just yet and glued 1 to each end of the 6 block piece. When I went to put the sides together, I realized the 3 blocks was just too long, so that's when I got out my miter box and cut 1 block off of each end. This looks much better, and I can now glue the pieces together. There's going to be a square in the center and the sections are not going to line up evenly. I glued 1 section to kind of the middle of the blocks for the section next to it. I hope that makes sense, but you'll see how it starts to come together. And I only glued the top together first, let that dry, and then glued the bottom. So I made this same lantern, but with the giant Jenga blocks from Five Below, and this time I glued the bottom together first, then added the sides, and flipped it over to add the top. And I think this way was a little easier to assemble in case you want to recreate this project. Back to the regular size blocks, I'm using one of these wood circles from Dollar Tree for the base of the lantern and filled in the hole with spackle, and then glued it down to the bottom of the lantern. At first I only used wood glue, but the blocks are not even, so I added a dab of hot glue as well. Then I stained the lantern with that same Valspar antiquing glaze, but I didn't love how that looked, so I ended up painting the blocks black and left the circle with the stain. And that's it for this one. I think it's such a cute lantern, and you can make this as small or as large as you want. I didn't get to paint the big lantern version since I got sick, but you can at least see here how big it is in comparison to this Dollar Tree one. Oh, and of course, if I'm filming something on the floor, you better believe Mr. Sarge is gonna jump right in. I found these adorable little ceramic garden mushrooms at the Dollar Tree. These are perfect just how they are, but of course, I'm gonna give them a little makeover. Also, I just want to throw this out there. I have seen these exact mushrooms listed on Etsy for $15 and claiming to be vintage. Please don't be fooled by sellers upcharging Dollar Tree items when they haven't done anything to it. Anyways, I removed the bottom sticker and then I'm going to apply gold leaf to the top of one of these mushrooms. I typically use the gold leaf flakes on my projects, but I've been wanting to give the sheets a try, especially for a project like this where I need to cover a large surface area. I picked up the sheets at Hobby Lobby, but you can get them anywhere craft supplies are sold. I have all of these supplies listed in my description box. But you guys, I have used the flakes on countless projects and the container is still full. That shows you just how far this stuff goes. You want to cover the surface where the gold leaf will go with a metal leaf adhesive. I dropped a dab of the glue on my desk, so I was scooping that up at first and added it all over the top of the mushroom. I also put glue underneath of the mushroom cap, and then I set this aside to dry for about 30 minutes. You want to let that glue dry and become tacky before adding your metal leaf. Here you can see the glue has dried. It's no longer white, but has kind of a milky look to the ceramic glaze top. Now I'm getting out my gold leaf sheets and carefully going to add it on top. I mentioned in a previous video I thought the sheets might give a smoother look. This might not have been the best test piece since it's a curved surface, but I definitely still got wrinkles in the final result. I'm still super happy with how it turned out though. On areas where the leaf didn't adhere right away, I just picked up some of that scrap and reapplied it. Once all the metal leaf is on, you want to take a brush. I use a paintbrush and dust off any loose pieces. Alright, I thought this little guy was done, but I decided to give the bottom an upgrade as well. I painted the whole thing white, and there are little indents around the stipe, which I learned is what the mushroom stem is called. I thought it would be cute to add gold leaf there as well. I took a tiny little detail brush to add the adhesive to the little details, and then added my gold leaf in with tweezers once it dried. This part was tricky. I ended up having to go over it twice with my glue to get the gold leaf to stick. It was also challenging just getting that gold leaf into those tiny little divots. Now for the second little Dollar Tree mushroom, this one is super easy. I just wanted to give the top a little patina look. So I painted it with my bronze patina paint by Dixie Belle. I've used this stuff a few times, but still not sure how I feel about it. You have to shake the paint really well because there are bits of metal in it. That's what causes the patina reaction once you add the spray. So I painted the mushroom cap with the bronze paint and let that dry. Then you want to add a second coat, and this time you add the patina spray while the bronze paint is still wet. I like to add it on with a sponge just because I don't like the way that it looks when the spray runs and drips, but if you like that look, you can certainly spray it on as well. Then you just set it aside and let the patina do its job.
MDF board letters that I got from Dollar General at Christmas time. They were $1 each, and I'm just marking off 3-inch sections. So I'm gonna cut this down into like little planks, and I'm just using my T-square to make sure I cut a nice straight line. And I'm gonna take this first one that I cut and use that as my guide to cut down 5 additional sections. This board was really thin. Like, it's a lot thinner than the boards that you would get, or the signs that you would get from the Dollar Tree. It's probably like half that thickness, so I was a little concerned this might not work out, but it looks great in the end. Also, I apologize, my head is going to keep getting in the way here because I changed my craft room around a little bit this weekend, and I have my camera in a different location, so I need to figure that out a bit because clearly my head is in the way. And girl, those roots need dyed. So then I'm just taking some 80 grit sandpaper and I'm scuffing up the surface because that red is going to be a lot to cover, and I don't want to have to use like 5 layers of paint. I'm just going to clean up all of my little surface area with my little vacuum. I know everyone loves the ladybug, but I kind of like my white little modern guy. Anyways, next I'm going to take some masking tape and we're going to cover up the backs of those holes because I want to fill them in with some spackling. I don't want to be able to see those holes. Then I'm going to take my Ivory paint by Waverly and we're just going to give everything, I give everything 3 coats because some of that red was really difficult to cover up, and then some areas I even needed to go over with like a touch-up like 4th coat. So it definitely took a lot to cover this up. Next, I'm taking some giant craft sticks that I got from Walmart, and I just painted one side of these with the same paint, and I'm going to use this to hold my boards together. So we're going to make kind of like a shiplap looking sign. And you can see I still have my 6 boards here. I do end up cutting one of these off because I thought it ended up looking a little too long. So next I'm just taking a tiny little chippy brush and I'm taking a dark gray paint and I'm going to use this to add some distressing all around the edges. I do it heavier, a little heavier around the edges, and then I do go back and add some in the center as well. And these tiny little chippy brushes are amazing. Melissa from All Things Crafty has suggested these and she loves these. So I had to pick some up and try them out for myself, and I absolutely love these. I will link them in my description box below because they are fantastic. You can find them on Amazon. Once I was happy with the gray, the dark gray there, I took my mineral with a like more flimsy chippy brush and I just went all over the rest of the area with this one, with this color. And my dog is back. Then I'm just gonna take some sandpaper and just kind of like blend it all together so it looks like it was meant to be there and there's no like harsh lines. Then I use my Cricut and I cut out the phrase spring vibes, and I'm going to add that to the top of my sign here. I want it to be overlapping these boards. I actually think I could have pulled it down a little bit farther, but I still love the way this looks. And I know a lot of people use the like hello spring, welcome spring, so I really wanted to come up with something different that I haven't really seen everywhere. So I thought spring vibes was the perfect thing. We're supposed to get another 6 inches of snow tomorrow, so give me all the spring vibes. We still have about 3 to 4 inches on the ground right now, so another 6 is not gonna be fun. I also really love mixing fonts when I do something like this. I just think it gives like an added detail and like more interest to the sign rather than having the same font for the whole thing. I will link the fonts that I used in the description box below as well. So next I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm just going to like cut in between where those boards meet because I want this to look like it was always part of this board and not something that was added after the fact. And then I just take my little burnishing scraper there and make sure it's all pushed down and like wrapping around those boards. Next, I'm gonna add in some florals. So I have these blooming branches from the Dollar Tree, and then also this lavender from Walmart, which is so beautiful. I absolutely love this. And now is where I cut off my bottom board because I thought there was just a little bit too much space to fill with the florals at the bottom. That's also why I could have brought my words down a little bit more, but I think the 5 words was the perfect size. So I just cut off little parts of my florals and I'm going to hot glue those down in place, just like coming like they're flowing from the right corner over the board. And then I'm gonna add 2 little pieces off to the left as well. So I knew I wanted to add some ribbon to this, and I should have thought this through before adding my florals because I wanted to add like a strip to the top and a strip to the bottom. Well, now my florals are in the way, so that's gonna create a problem. So now I have to take my heat tool, remove the florals that I just added so that I can put my ribbon down and then put my florals back on top of it. It ended up being just fine. Like, you really couldn't tell that I had to take those off, but I just was laughing at myself that I didn't think that through first. Which is a big problem with me whenever I'm crafting. I'm like a hurricane when I'm crafting. I make the biggest mess around me and then I don't think things through. But I feel like a lot of us are like that. Anyways, I'm taking this plant hanger that I got from the Dollar Tree. It comes with 3 of these chain links on it. We only need 2 because I'm going to use this as my hanger for the picture. So I'm going to cut it to the length I want and then put a generous amount of hot glue to hold it in place on the back. I'm also going to take these craft sticks and put those on top to secure it down as well. And here's a look at how this turned out. This is my favorite project in today's video. I just absolutely love everything about it. What do you guys think?
This project is so easy to create. You're going to take 2 blocks and glue them end to end and make 17 sets just like this. Once the glue has a grip on the blocks, which doesn't take long with this wood glue super glue from Dollar Tree, glue the sets together to create a long rectangle. Next, I'm taking a glass test tube that I got from Michael's, and we're making a little propagation station. I ended up swapping this one out for a wider tube later on just because the plant I had put in it already has a good root system and it was just too big for that narrower tube. To attach the tube to the blocks, I'm using this leather ribbon that I have. I marked where I want the ribbon to go on the blocks and used my drill carefully so I don't break the blocks and drilled a hole on either side. You don't have to attach the tube this way though. You could also glue the leather or whatever you have to use directly to the glass and then glue that down on top of your blocks. But before I attach the tube, I stain the blocks using my Valspar antiquing glaze and a baby wipe. Then I added the leather to hold the glass tube and glued it down to the back. I still have the smaller tube here, but then I swapped it out for the wider one. And last, I added another piece of that leather ribbon as a hanger, and this project is complete.
And I'm starting out taking this wire hanging planter basket from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to remove that hanging wire part, the hook. Yeah, the hook, that's what it is, and set that aside because we don't need it. Next up, I'm just going to take some foam core board, trace out my circle, and cut that out. And I'm going to use all of these paints to give a faux wood look to my foam core board circle that we cut out. So first I'm taking the color Mineral and I am covering the entire foam circle. Now, if you are familiar with Peppermint Cactus, she does some amazing foam core board projects, and I've only watched like one or two of her videos. I'll link her channel below, but she has some fantastic methods, I guess you would say, for making foam board look like faux wood and other things. So I just kind of took that inspiration and layered on all of these different tones of browns until I was happy with the look that I got. So again, I am just layering on each of these different colors while the paint is still wet, and I'm also using the same brush. I was going to use different brushes for each color, but I realized it was probably better to get that true blended faux wood look using the same brush. And I think this turned out so amazing, and I want to try this on other materials. While I wait for this paint to dry, I am taking these longer dowel rods that you can find at the Dollar Tree, along with this hula skirt you can also find at the Dollar Tree with their summer decor. So I'm going to take one dowel rod, line it up with each of these metal wire parts on our hanging planter. I'm going to hot glue that in place. Now I know that hot glue and metal do not get along very well, so that is where our hula skirt is going to come in handy. The hot glue did help hold it in place long enough for me to be able to take the hula skirt, pull off a couple of strands, and then wrap it around my dowel and that wire piece. I wrapped it around maybe 6 times and then hot glued it in place, and these dowels are not going anywhere. I just repeated this process all the way around my wire basket. Next, I wanted to glue the dowel rods down to the foam core round circle. And the way I got this to work, because you can see that those dowels are sticking out farther than where the foam core board is, they're not exactly straight up and down. So I started with opposing sides. So I glued one side, turned it around 180 degrees, glued the other side, and then I did like the opposing sides again. I hope that makes sense. And then I went around and glued everything in between. So once I had that all glued down, and it worked out just fine, nothing popped off, it all stayed in place where I wanted it. Now I'm taking some wooden beads, and this is a part I didn't entirely think through before I just started gluing them down. So I wanted to put the larger beads all the way around, but they wouldn't really fit in between all of my spaces. So I had to grab just like random sizes and just use whatever would work. And I have like some smaller ones, some medium ones, some bigger ones, and there is absolutely no rhyme or reason to how they're sitting around the edge. And I think it actually gave it a pretty unique look, but it definitely wasn't what I had intended to do originally. So once I had all of that figured out, I'm just taking my ivory chalk paint, and I gave all of the wooden beads and the dowels one coat of paint, and then I gave the black wire basket 2 coats. So I was okay with some of that brown or wood tone showing through a little bit on the wooden pieces. Next, I'm just going to dry brush again. So I'm taking some mineral, some of the fawn, and some of the antique Waverly wax. And similar to what I did on the foam core board, I am just, this time I'm dry brushing. And I'm just going around all of the wooden beads, everything that I just painted white to give a distressed look. And once I was happy with that, I took some nautical rope from the Dollar Tree, and I'm gluing this around the bottom to cover up the bottom of the dowel rods, that foam core board, and like any hot glue that was seeping out on the bottom of the beads. Next, I'm taking these little, I don't even know what these are, like little fruit dishes you can find from the Dollar Tree. They're plastic. They are in like the cookware section maybe, or the glassware section. And I'm just doing the exact same process that I did to all of the wood parts, giving it that distressed look, and then adding this little finial guy right on top. Next, I'm taking some jute cord, wrapping it around that top, and then I glue this on top of my little bird cage. I was completely out of frame for that, so I just didn't even show it. Then for the last step, you could have left it there. I actually did, and then the next day I was like, no, it's kind of still missing something. So I grabbed some more jute cord and wrapped it all around the dowels and that wire frame just to give it a little added detail, and I think this was the perfect finishing touch. And I also added one more row of the jute cord around the bottom and then burned off all of the little fraying bits. And that was it for this one, but before I show you the final reveal, we are going to do one additional project. So I'm taking 2 different birdhouses that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to paint them with opposing colors. So first I'm painting the roof and the base of this one in the color Fawn from Waverly, and then I'm going to paint the body in the color Mineral. And for that second house, I'm going to use the opposite colors, so the roof will be Mineral and the body will be Fawn. Once I have those painted, I'm taking this napkin that I've just had laying around, and I'm going to peel it apart because we're going to decoupage this on parts of the birdhouse. So I'm just ripping up pieces that I want to put on top, and again, I'm doing this on opposing parts of the 2 birdhouses. So one, I'm adding the decoupage to the roof and to the base, and on the other one, I will add the decoupage to the body. And I just very gently take my decoupage glue and put it over top of the napkins as well as underneath. Next, I'm going to distress everything to give it that same vintage feel that our bird cage has. So I'm taking my Waverly wax and going all around the edges of my decoupage napkin paper parts. Then I'm taking some ivory and I am just dry brushing all over along with some antique Waverly wax to give it that distressed and weathered look. Once that's complete, I took a dowel rod, cut it into 2 different lengths, And I'm grabbing these circle pieces that work in a variety pack that came from the Dollar Tree. And I am gluing the dowel rod in between two of the circles. And this is going to be the stand or the base for our bird houses. And then I just painted these exactly like I did with the birdhouse, ivory, and then distressed them with the mineral fawn and antique wax. And I'm going to glue it to the bottom of my birdhouse. For a final touch here, I'm taking some Spanish moss and gluing it right down to the bottom of the bird hole so that it looks like a little nest that is inside of there. Then I just take some reindeer moss and I glued this down on like varying parts of my birdhouse just to give a little color. And then I placed some in the bottom of the bird cage as well. And here is how it turned out. I absolutely love this. It turned out better than I had envisioned it to, and I am just absolutely in love with this. You could style this in so many different ways. You could add some candles to the bottom, add some greenery, add some florals. You don't have to be so literal as I was and put some birdhouses in there. I think I will end up changing this up, but I just think it is perfect for now.
I've had these 3 picture frames in my stash for quite a while now, and I know you can find very similar ones at Dollar Tree. I'm not sure where these ones came from, but I'm gonna remove the backs of these, and then I got out some foam core board. I'm gonna cut around the backing with my X-Acto knife so I have a piece of the foam core board that fits snugly inside the frames. Next, I'm taking some masking tape and I want to tape off all along the edges. I didn't put the tape directly up against the edge. I wanted to kind of cut the tape in half, just to get a white border that was the size that I wanted all the way around the foam core board. Then I'm taking my moss green paint by Waverly and I'm using a sponge dauber here to apply all over the foam core board. I just really like the texture and the dimension that using a sponge dauber added to the paint rather than using a flat brush. And again, use whatever color makes you happy here and go with your aesthetic. I gave all 3 foam core boards 2 coats of the green paint. Then I got out my rub and buff. I really wanted to give these frames more of a vintage type of look. I have the colors Antique Gold, European Gold, and Gold Leaf. I wanted to see which one I liked against that black frame, so I did a little test section on the back. I ended up going with that Antique Gold because it felt the brightest against the black frame. The other 2 felt a little bit more sheer. To apply rub and buff, you can simply just use your finger. It does stain a little bit and you might need to use some rubbing alcohol or something to take it off of your hand with. I like to use a makeup brush here because it's really soft and it blends the rub and buff in nicely. It also helps to spread it a lot farther. I covered all 3 frames with about 1.5 coats of the rub and buff. I didn't want a full coverage here, but wanted that black to peek through in a little bit for an aged look. When I went to remove the masking tape from the foam core board, I should have known it was going to rip off some of that foam core board top. After all, it is just paper as the top layer. And at first I was really upset by this. However, I think it turned out to be a really happy accident because it ended up giving even more of that aged and vintage type of look that I was going for in the first place. So once I stepped back to take a look at how they had turned out, I really loved it. I did just have to touch up one small section where the paper ripped up a little too far. Next, I had cut out a few greenery images with my Cricut machine, and I'm gonna weed them out now. So I cut a Monstera leaf and then 2 basic greenery stem looking images. And of course, you can print out any image that fits your style. Vintage botanical art has been trending for a while, and I wanted to recreate that look for myself. Once I got my images weeded, I'm just taking some clear contact paper. I prefer using this over transfer tape. I find that it's a little bit less sticky and doesn't rip off my paint when I'm applying it to the vinyl. I know you can use the t-shirt trick, but I just don't love using that method and really prefer the contact paper. Then I laid my botanical art in the center of the foam core board and removed that contact paper. You could use even larger frames to make this really impactful or create a whole gallery wall for your space in your home. I really love the way these turned out. I just pop them right back in their frame and they're good to go to hang on the wall. Dough bowls are seen everywhere right now in home stores and home styling, so that's going to be our first project today. I actually saw Wendy over at White Sparrow Living create this, and I knew I had to do something similar. So I got these tombstone looking styrofoam pieces from the Dollar Tree. I picked up 8 of them. You do want to make sure you remove that little metal piece that is the stake that holds them into the ground. And then I'm going to start hot gluing them together. So I have 8 and I'm creating 2 stacks of 4 of the styrofoam tombstones glued together. So here's the 2 sets of 4 glued together, and they don't resemble anything even close to the shape of a dough bowl. So what I'm gonna do is take my pencil and just start outlining where I want to cut down these styrofoam tombstones at. And then I'm going to take it out into my garage. This was a super messy part of the process. And I'm going to take my jigsaw. I did put it on a very low setting, low speed, so that I would have better control over cutting it out. And I just started cutting down section by section. My blade was not long enough to go through all 4 of these tombstones at once, so I had to cut through like 2.5 of them, and then I would have to keep flipping it over and then cutting out the other side. And you don't have to use a jigsaw to do this. Wendy from White Sparrow Living, she used a kitchen knife, a serrated kitchen knife, and that worked great for her. I just figured if I had this tool, I might as well use it. Is easily sandable, and you can manipulate it with a sanding block or sandpaper. So I just went over top of the entire thing with my sanding block just to get out any of those lumps and bumps that were left behind from the saw blade. Now I need to cut out the middle of this. So once again, I'm taking my pencil and just outlining where I want to cut out the center. And on most dough bowls, these are hand carved pieces of wood, and the sides are a little bit thicker where you would like kind of pick it up like as if it were a handle. So I did leave that part a little bit wider, and then just taking a box cutter here, I'm just slashing up some strips in it. I ended up taking out 3 of the styrofoam tombstones, leaving 1 for the bottom base of the dough bowl. Now to cover up all of the ugliness of the styrofoam, I'm taking some poster board and just tracing out the inside. I did have to cut this down several times. I was actually really bad at tracing it, but once I finally got it figured out and it was able to fit inside of my styrofoam, I just taped that down with some painter's tape and then started cutting out strips of the poster board to angle them down, because the dough bowl sides are like at a slant. They are not straight up and down. And this is exactly what Wendy did in her project as well, which I thought was absolutely genius. So I just started bending the pieces of poster board around where I needed them to be, taping them down in place, and working my way around the entire inside of the dough bowl. Next, we're gonna do some super fun but super messy paper mache. So I'm taking this shipping paper that I got from the Dollar Tree and I'm gonna start cutting it down into long strips. After I cut all of my long strips down, I did cut a lot of them in half so they would be a little bit smaller and easier to work with. I would recommend cutting these down to about 2-inch width strips. I think that would work out the best when it comes to overlapping the pieces of paper and getting less ripples. Next, I'm going to take this Jot glue. This is the bigger size that they have at the Dollar Tree as well. And I'm going to start pouring it into a bowl. This bowl ended up being way too big and I put it in a smaller one here in a second. But I'm just going to add some water to water down my mixture and make it more of the consistency that I need for the paper mache. So you can see how runny it is here. Now we can start adding in our strips of paper to the glue mixture. You want to make sure you get them pretty good and covered in the glue. I realized at first that my mixture was not quite runny enough. You can still see that it's pretty thick on there. So after I added this first strip, I did go back, add in a little bit more water so that it was a little bit thinner and easier to work with. I'm just going to start covering up the entire thing. I did end up having to do this over 2 days because I needed that glue paper mache mixture to dry on the top before I could flip it over and then do the bottom. The great thing about these dough bowls and using the paper mache as your like main medium for making this, dough bowls are hand carved wood. So all of those imperfections in the paper and the wrinkles and the lumps and bumps that you get just really did add to the authentic look of this piece. Now I do notice some of the like paper strips on my finished project and I wish I had actually ripped them down on the edges rather than cut them all. I would have cut them lengthwise but then ripped them on the sides so that it was a little bit more seamless as they fit together. But overall, I'm still super happy and pleased with the way this turned out. But once I'm done with the paper mache part, let that all dry. I am taking Mod Podge and putting a good layer over top of the entire piece just to make sure it is all nice and sealed together and all of that paper is stuck down really well. Then we can go on to painting. So I'm starting out with this Territorial beige color by Apple Barrel. I wanted to give it kind of a lighter look. I had thought at first that's what I was going for. So that's what I'm doing here. And then I started adding in some white. I wanted to give it that kind of light wood but whitewashed effect. So I'm taking this Linen White by Rust-Oleum and I am dry brushing again over top of the entire piece. This time I gave it a really heavy dry brush of the white to pretty much cover up the entire thing. So here you can start to see how it's looking with the heavy coat of the white dry brushing, and it did look good. It just, after a day or two of sitting on it and then just looking at it, I realized it wasn't exactly what I was going for. I did want it to have more of that wood look and a darker look for my living room. So I went back in with the Territorial beige. I gave this a pretty good dry brushing over top of the entire thing once again. And then while that was still wet, I went in with the DIY dark wax. This stuff was a game changer for this project. If you haven't tried this yet, you seriously need to. I was going to use the Waverly Antique Wax, but I'm so glad that I didn't. I love the antique wax, but I think it would have given a different look and more of a warmer tone to the dough bowl, which wasn't exactly what I was going for. So I'm so happy that I used this DIY dark wax and I just kept building it up, and especially in all of the like areas where there were wrinkles in the paper, and it just added so much depth and dimension to this piece. I am so happy with the way that it turned out. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments. Is this something that you would ever take on? Is it way too involved for you? Do you enjoy more of the easy and simpler projects? Sometimes I just really love these larger scale projects. For this project, I'm taking these bud vases that I got from the Dollar Tree. I think these were out last spring, but I love the shape of them and painted both vases in a coat of gesso. Next, I'm taking my detail tip hot glue gun and going to start adding lines of hot glue all over the vase. I saw someone do this on social media. I can't remember if it was on Instagram or TikTok or where, but I thought it was genius for creating kind of an organic texture. I had no rhyme or reason to how I was applying the hot glue. I just made zigzags and didn't want it to look too symmetrical or like perfect lines. The detail tip glue gun is perfect for this project since you have a lot more control over how much is coming out and how thin the lines are. I did one of the vases with horizontal lines and the other with vertical lines for a bit of contrast. After I covered both vases in hot glue, I painted them with this nutmeg spray paint. Unfortunately, the spray paint did not stick to the surface very well. It looks like a mess, but it looks like it didn't stick to the gesso, which is interesting because gesso is meant to be a primer for paint to adhere to. Very strange. So I decided to take my Dixie Belle paint in the color Mud Puddle and used a chippy brush to get in all of the grooves between the glue. Once that paint was dry, I took the Dixie Belle white wax with a stencil brush to stipple it over top of the paint. Let me tell you, I love this white wax so much better than Waverly. Waverly is so sticky and it's not white. If you're looking for a good white wax, give this one a try. I did small sections and then wiped back the wax, leaving it in the grooves. I love the way these turned out, so unique and perfect for every day. This project was also a fail, but not as epic of a fail as the last one. I was at least able to save it and do something a little bit different than my original design. I'm taking this Dollar Tree planter, which is honestly super flimsy, but the bottom comes off for water drainage. And what I want to do with this one, I need the drainage holes with the bottom left on. So taking my spade bit, you could also use a regular drill bit or even a knife. I just need to add some holes. I also have this little saucer from Lowe's that I'm going to add 2 holes in as well. Next, taking E6000, I'm going to attach the smaller saucer to the bottom of the planter, and here's where I made my first mistake. I also should have glued the removable part from the original Dollar Tree planter in place, but I didn't think about that. The next day, when the glue was dry, I'm taking this lightweight spackle and going to spread it all over the planter. I was trying to speed up the dry process here, and that's where I made the second mistake. I'm really trying to keep up the quality of my videos while my 9-to-5 work life is pretty chaotic. I really only have 1.5 days to put projects together until my boss comes back from maternity leave. Anyways, I set this in front of my heat vent to help it dry, and this actually caused it to crack. And it cracked right along the seam where the removable base is. And I think even if I had glued that down, it still would have cracked because there were cracks in other areas. That heat was just forcing it to dry quicker than it naturally would have. But I kept going and I sanded the spackle down to be smoother. I originally wanted to etch a design into the spackle, but with the amount of texture on this, that wasn't going to look good. I am going to come back to this at a later date. Anyways, I added another thin layer of spackle where the crack was, which I didn't record for some reason, and allowed it to dry naturally, not in front of the heat. This time it did not crack apart, and I sanded it down again to make this section blend as seamlessly as I could get it. Next, I'm taking Fawn by Waverly. It's a slightly warm tone, medium brown, and I love this color so much. I painted a thick coat all over, making sure to get in all the deep cracks and crevices. Once the paint's dry, I'm taking this white wax, also by Waverly. I really want to try the DIY white wax because this one is just okay in my opinion, but using a chippy brush, I added a heavy dry brush on top of the fawn paint and then wiped it off. I did pour the wax into my paint tray so I don't get the brown paint in it and contaminate it. I love the dimension this added to the planter. This material absolutely needs to be sealed, especially if you plan to keep a live plant in it like I do. To seal it, I used this Rust-Oleum clear enamel in matte, so even though this didn't turn out how I wanted, I still love the way it looks in the end. Had this idea for over a year and just haven't done it yet. I got these chopping mats from the Dollar Tree and they are see-through. One side's kind of frosted looking and the other is shiny. I want to decoupage the mat and I grabbed two options from my stash. One's a decoupage paper and the other is a basic tissue paper that was a little bit more colorful. Both options are stunning and very spring feeling, but I thought you could see the print and pattern a little bit better on the blue florals, so I went with that one. Since the decoupage paper wasn't as tall as the chopping mat, I had to cut it down a little bit. I used my X-Acto knife to cut it down, and it was really easy to cut through. Guess that wouldn't really make it a good chopping mat though. I then cut the mat in half because I'm making a little light box or a lantern and it needs 4 sides. Next, I wiped down the surface of the mat. Since we're decoupaging the paper to the back or the shiny side, I wanted to make sure there was no fingerprints or dust that got trapped and you would see them from the other side. I'm going to use my liquid patina to glue the paper onto the mat, but I actually think Mod Podge or decoupage glue would have been a little bit better for this project specifically. Decoupage paper is pretty thick, much thicker than when you use a napkin, and the liquid patina dries quickly. I used a fan brush to apply the glue so it would get up under the paper easily and apply the glue to all of the areas. I wasn't thinking when I did this first one, I had wanted to add both mats to the paper before cutting the paper down, but I had only added the one mat at first, so I had to cut this one down, but for the second paper, I added both mats and glued them at the same time. As the glue was drying, I realized I could see some streaks under the paper. It was like the areas that had more glue turned the paper more transparent, and the thinner glue areas stayed whiter. So I went back over top of the whole thing with a layer of the patina. I sanded off all the excess paper, and here's why I would have used a thicker glue like Mod Podge. You can see the paper peeling away from all the corners. I had to add more patina to make sure it stays down. Next, we need to build the lantern structure. I was able to create a rectangle with the Jenga blocks without having to cut down any of them again. Winning! I made 4 rectangles, and then before I added the decoupage mats, I want to paint them. I wanted the lantern to have a ton of texture, so I added baking soda to my paint, and I added a lot of baking soda. The way I like to get the most texture by using this method is by painting the first coat on how you normally would paint something. And then when you add the second coat, or however many coats you want after, you stipple it on. I love this technique. It is kind of hard to tell on camera here, but I'll make sure to get a close-up in the reveal. Once the paint was all dry, I'm adding decoupage mats onto the blocks with hot glue. The one thing you want to be cognizant of here is that you are gluing the frosted side down, so that's what you see on the outside of the lantern. That way you don't have the paper texture facing out. Next, I assembled the lantern and glued all 4 sides together. I realized after I put everything together, I needed a base for inside of the lantern, because I'm gonna add some feet and I need something to put the light on. So I glued some blocks together. They don't fit perfectly on the bottom, but that's okay. You're not gonna see this part. I just painted them white as well, but not with the texture paint. It was a little difficult to get the blocks glued in. I had dry fitted it and it was pretty snug, so of course when I went to actually glue it in, one side didn't want to cooperate. But I left it as is. Like I said, you aren't going to see this part. And last, I grabbed these little feet that I have. I think these are from Hobby Lobby, and I glued them onto the base. I like how they looked being in a little bit from the edge. I just love how this project turned out. I think it is so stunning and even more so than I had envisioned. I am taking this Dollar Tree vase along with some Dollar Tree nautical rope. This is the 9.5-foot nautical rope, and I use almost 3 pieces. We are going to start attaching the nautical rope around the vase using some hot glue. This is such an easy project. Now, I know that hot glue and glass do not get along. They are not friends, but as I go around, I attach that very bottom row to the glass itself because I needed something to adhere it to. But then as we move up to the next row and everything after that, I add the hot glue so that it is touching mostly the nautical rope. A little bit of it is on the glass as well, but we are mostly attaching the rope to itself for each layer. And we're just going to continue repeating this process all the way around, all the way up the glass vase. Whenever my strands of rope end, I do make sure to end them all in the same exact spot so that they can all be on the back of the vase. And I don't know why I didn't show you guys that part. As I get to the top, I am going up above that glass rim of the vase by like 1 line. That way you can't see the glass. Then I'm going to cut my nautical rope off at an angle, and we're going to hot glue that kind of down inside of the vase, and you can see what I'm doing here. So I didn't realize this until it was too late, but apparently I had 2 different styles of nautical rope. It does bother me a little bit, but there's nothing I can do about it. It is too late to change it now, so it is what it is. Next, I'm taking a lighter and singeing off all of those little fraying fuzzy bits off of the nautical rope. This part is certainly optional. If you like that more rustic look, by all means, leave it the way it is. So what we are doing with this vase is turning it into an adorable beehive. I absolutely love bees. So I just grabbed a votive candle holder, used that for my circle shape, outlined it with a Sharpie, and I'm filling it in with my black Waverly chalk paint. I didn't think the black Waverly chalk paint was dark enough after it dried, so I do go back over it with my apple barrel acrylic paint just to give it a more deep black and rich look. Next, I'm taking one of the leftover pieces of nautical rope, and we are going to outline that black circle so that it looks like the opening to our beehive. And for a last little detail here, I wanted to make it look like there was honey dripping out of that beehive opening. So I'm taking my mini hot glue gun and I just start pouring on the hot glue or pumping on the hot glue, and then I let it drip. Once it starts to drip and I'm happy with the way it's starting to look, I tilted it back, let it cool, and then I repeated that process a few times until I was happy with the way the honey looked. And then I just added in a little bit of lavender floral, and that was it for this one. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments. I know this is not an original idea. This has been done before, but it is so cute and so fun for summer decor. Are the Dollar Tree wood items that we are going to be using for project number 1. I did forget to show those little cube wood pieces, but you'll see those here in just a second. So I'm starting out by removing that back from the picture frame. We don't need this, set that aside for another project, and then also removing those little clips that hold the picture in place. Then I'm taking my Jenga blocks, and here's where you can see those little wood cubes, and I laid everything out in like a lattice formation, or you could call them little X's if you want. And I glued everything together while it was still inside of these frames. And the reason I did that was to make sure after everything was glued together and then I paint everything, it's all going to fit snugly back together, and I won't have to worry about any of my little parts shifting around and not being, you know, if they got off by like a little centimeter or something, it wasn't going to fit back inside of this frame. So I'm using wood glue here and then a paintbrush, and I just smear it across the bottom piece of my Jenga block, add it to that little cube, and then I let everything dry. Now everything is going to get a light coat of my ivory colored chalk paint. I don't mind some of the wood grain peeking through, and then I'm gonna start gluing things together. So using my Starbond super glue, I'm taking one of those Dollar Tree planks and I'm adding it to the back of this picture frame. Then I'm taking another one, I cut it in half, and I'm gluing each half to the sides of another one of those planks. And we're gonna be creating a little box here. So this is the bottom and the sides, and then my fourth plank is going to be the front of it. So it has an opening at the top, and you'll see what I mean here in just a second. Next, I do take some of my my hot glue, and I'm gonna just run a bead along the seam on the inside of my box, and then take my silicone Dollar Tree spatula, smooth out that hot glue, and this is just gonna reinforce my box and make sure it's gonna stay held together. Next, everything is getting a coat of distressing. I thought I put a light distressing on this. I think I went a little heavier than I had intended to, but you know, distressing is personal preference. However you like to distress, heavy, light, not at all, whatever you enjoy. Now we're going to add that little box onto the picture frame, so you can see how I'm gluing it here, and that's why we put that back on the back of the picture frame, so that there would be a back to this little box as well. And then I'm gluing my little lattice piece into the frame as well, all with my Starbond super glue. Then I'm just gonna add in some floral foam. I topped it off with some sheet moss, added some greenery, and that was it for this one. Let me know what you think. These are these Dollar Tree mirrors. They had them out a little while ago. I had bought them in white originally, tried to paint them black to make some hexagon shelves, and the paint didn't stick, long story short. So I ended up going back, buying the black ones, and I made these hexagon shelves, which I absolutely love. But I still had these ones left over that were all chippy, messed up, didn't know what to do with, just sitting around. So I sanded off all the black paint, and these are the original color. They were white. So we're gonna attempt something different. I think my problem was I should have sanded down the plastic first to get it to stick. I literally did nothing, just went right in with paint. So now the surface is all roughed up. I sanded it down, sanded all that paint off, and we're gonna try to paint these again and do something different with them.
So first I'm going to take this deep navy blue homemade paint that I have and paint both of my frames. So I made this paint color mixing True Navy by Apple Barrel and Ink by Waverly. And then I want to cover up this back side because it's open and I want it to be a solid frame. Taking some foam core board, I'm just going to trace both the inside and outside of my foam board and then cut this out using my X-Acto knife. So when you're cutting foam core board, you want to have a very sharp knife. I put a brand new blade in my X-Acto knife so that I would get a nice clean line and not a jaggedy line. Once I have everything cut out, I just pop it out and hot glue it to the back of my frame using my Surebonder detail tip glue gun, so I didn't have a ton of hot glue seeping out the ends. And I also used the Gorilla hot glue sticks. Then I just painted everything, the foam core and the sides, all with that same deep navy color. I also just trimmed off any of the foam core that was hanging over the edge of the frame. Next, I'm taking this reed that I got from Amazon, and I will link it below. I don't know what I did to it, but I set it down and came back and it was a hot mess and unraveled. But anyways, I'm gonna just glue this down all the way around my frame, and this is also going to help conceal the seam of where we added that foam core board. So using my E6000 and hot glue, I'm going to attach my little reed pieces. Now you do not want to mix these two glues. You will deactivate the longevity of your E6000 and it will not hold up over time. I see a lot of people do that mistake of just putting both of them down together. Do not mix them, people. You do not want to do that. But I also decided to cut these down because I wanted those sharp points all around my hexagon rather than one continuous strip that wasn't going to lay as flat as I wanted it to. Once I had all of my reed glued down, I just took both of my hexagon frames and I slid them together so that they formed like this little, I don't even know what kind of shape you would call this, but so that they sat nicely together. I did not glue these in place. You certainly could if you wanted a more secure hold, but they fit together pretty snug. So then I'm taking this circle wood round that I got from Walmart, and again, I'm painting this with my navy blue paint. So I don't show this part because I had to go back in afterwards and add it, but I took a Jenga tumbling tower block that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I also painted that navy because I needed something more to hold my terracotta pot up. This just wasn't glued down to the surface quite enough to hold my pot. So you'll see what I mean here in just a minute. But then I'm going to glue my circle down to the bottom of my hexagon shells, and there was a gap underneath of it. You can't really tell here, but I did need to put that Jenga block under the circle and onto the frame so that it would have like some more support and hold up my pot and be a little bit more secure. Then I just took some 4mm macrame cord, and I'm gonna use this for my hanger part. Now, I don't know if I love this. I think I might go back and either add in a chain or some jute or something else that's just a little more cohesive with this look. But this was what I used for now. Then I'm just gonna take a very generous amount of my Gorilla hot glue, put it on my wood round, and then glue a medium-sized terracotta pot from the Dollar Tree right down to the center. After that's dry, I'm gonna take these florals that I got from Hobby Lobby, and if anyone knows what these are called, let me know in the description box. There was no name on the tag or in the location I picked these up from Hobby Lobby, so I do not know what they are called, but they are beautiful. And here is how it turned out.
For this project, you'll need 8 Jenga blocks, and using wood glue, I glued them together in pairs. Once that was dry, I glued the 4 pairs together to create a square. And to make a square, you want to glue the sections so one end is on the outside, one end is on the inside. I let the square dry and then took wood filler and added it to all of the cracks. This isn't necessary, I'm just a perfectionist. And then I took 2mm macrame cord and cut down 5 strands. I didn't measure the length, but this is probably about 30 inches each. And then I folded each strand in half and added it to the corners of the square using a lark's head knot. To bring all the cords together at the top, I used the 5th strand and made a wrap. I have a few videos on how to create the wrap, so I will link one up in the cards and also down in my description box. I was going to leave the square like this, but felt like it was missing something, so I added some of those white mosaic tiles around the edge and gave the wood a whitewash. This is another one I would recommend a stronger adhesive. The tiles did keep popping off on me with just using hot glue. For the next part of this DIY, I'm taking a Dollar Tree terracotta pot. This is the larger size they carry that usually comes in a 2-pack, and I painted it white. Then I'm using my Cricut Design Space app on my phone to find a design for the pot. In a new project, select images in the bottom left, and I typed in the word vine, then scrolled through until I found something I liked. You can select multiple images and add them all to your project at the same time. So once I had my images, select insert on the bottom right. Then you can play around with the size you need or duplicating the images by selecting the image and find edit at the bottom, enter the size you need, and then if you want to duplicate the image, select that under action. Next, select make it up in the top right. This is going to take you to your mat so you can see how much vinyl is needed, and select next to connect to the Cricut. Now load your mat and start cutting. I prefer to use contact paper when making stencils since they're going to be thrown away. After the design prints, I'm going to reverse weed it, removing all of the vinyl around my decal. And then using clear contact paper, pick up my decal and apply it to the terracotta pot. Next, I painted the pot with the color agave, giving it 2 coats. Typically when I apply a decal like this and paint over it, I remove the vinyl while the paint is still wet. However, with this one, that did not work out so well. The paint was sticking to the decal and peeling up with it. When I got to the last one, the paint was dry, so that one came off the cleanest, and I did go back and touch up the areas that needed it with a little detail paintbrush. But I think the terracotta texture is what caused the paint to peel up on this one. Now I just added the pot to the square and added some florals. I love the way this one turned out.
This next DIY, I'm taking a smaller hurricane vase from the Dollar Tree and some masking tape, and I'm just going to take the masking tape, wrap it all the way around the hurricane vase very loosely. You want to have those like veins in there and the crinkling of the paper because we're going to be making a faux birchwood looking branch, I guess you would say. It's a vase, faux birchwood branch vase. I don't know. Anyways, I got this idea from Holly over at Hot Humble Pie, and I will link her video in the description box below. I followed her tutorial exactly, so if you want to see the way she did it as well, it will be linked in the description box. So you just want to wrap it all the way up, making sure to smooth down everything nice and tight against that glass, but making sure that those creases are still in there. And then you want to take some white paint and paint the entire thing. Next, you're going to take your X-Acto knife and just anywhere that you think there's a little bit of raised pieces, you want to just kind of shave them down a little bit because wood has imperfection like this. It's not all completely smooth. One thing I wish I would have done differently here is painted again after I did that step, or did that step before I had painted the white, because you can see the masking tape still through everything else, but you can only see it if you look really close. So now I'm going to take Territorial Beige from Apple Barrel, and I'm going to get a really dry brush. So I'm using a thicker chippy brush, and you want to make sure that most of that paint is not on your brush, and you're just going to dry brush all around the entire vase. And in between each layer of paint, you want to make sure it is really dry. So I got out my heat tool in between everything to make sure that I wasn't going to get any blending of the colors. I just wanted to show you that step so that you know in between every single color we do here, I am using my heat tool. So I took Elephant Gray next. In Holly's video, she uses Pewter Gray, but I didn't have that and I couldn't find it in the store. So I just used Elephant Gray because it was very similar. And we're just gonna do that same thing, dry brush all the way around. Next, we're taking Burnt Umber, and I did again use my heat tool and make sure this was very dry in between each layer of paint. So then we're taking Burnt Umber, doing the exact same thing. And I just turned my brush short ways, I guess, instead of fat ways as well, to get some different dimension in there. And here you can see what it's looking like so far. So next I'm going to take my white, and we want to give it like a halo veil effect. We want to kind of tone down those really sharp lines in there from the paint, and then yeah, just give it a little halo effect. Next I'm taking the elephant gray again, and this time I'm using my finger, and we just want to add in like those little knots that you would see in the birch wood bark. And I just put some smaller ones, maybe some little bit bigger ones, and wherever I thought it would look nice. Once I have those on, I'm taking burnt umber again with a small little detail brush, and you're gonna basically draw eyes around the pewter gray knots that we created to give some dimension. Then I'm taking antique parchment, and now you want to use this instead of the white, because the white is basically not white anymore after all of those colors we put on top of it. So it would be too much of a stark contrast if we used white. And you just want to go over everything again with that antique parchment. And the last step is to add in some pencil lines so that you get that effect that birch wood has. And that's it for this project. It was really simple. I think Holly's turned out much better than mine did, but I still love the way it looks. And here you can kind of see where that masking tape is peeking through a little bit, but like I said, you can only see that if you're looking really close at it. We're gonna start out making the tiered tray, and I had every intention of making this with all Dollar Tree products, but you can see here that some of that like paper and glue from the mat was just stuck on there, and me being too forceful and trying to get every last little bit of that off, I ended up breaking the glass. Of course. I am not surprised because I'm way too rough with things like this, and the Dollar Tree product is just not the quality to stand up to me. But anyways, it ended up being a happy mistake, or a happy accident. I really love the way it ended up turning out. I just grabbed some scrap wood from my living room transformation in my garage, cut it down to the exact same sizes that the frames were. You can see that up in the corner there, and then I'm just going to paint these black. I was going to paint the picture frames themselves, or the glass part of the picture frames black and the frames, but this ended up working out just fine. So next I'm going to take some tumbling tower blocks, and I'm going to glue these together to form the like edge of our tray, if that makes sense. You'll see what I mean here in a second, but I'm not going to tell you how many I glued together because it's just going to depend on the size of your tray base. So I ended up having to cut a few of them down with my handsaw to make sure it would fit perfectly across all four corners. See, so you can see here that they didn't all fit with full blocks, so I did just have to mark them, and like I said, I took these out in my garage, just used my handsaw and cut them down to the length I needed. Next, I just took some lightweight spackling and filled in all the holes. Some of these I glued with hot glue, some of them I glued with wood glue because I wanted to see what the difference was. I wanted this to look like one full piece of wood, but it really didn't matter because both ways I did it, you could still tell that these were blocks glued together. So it's probably easier to just use the hot glue. But then I filled in any little cracks with the spackling, and once that dried, I just took a damp cloth and I was able to just wipe off any excess. I didn't need to sand it at all. That part was great. And the next thing I'm gonna do is take my antique Waverly antique wax, and I'm just going to paint all of my block pieces. front, back, and all of their sides. Then I'm going to take my hot glue and just glue all 4 sides around the base part of my tray. And I love that you could still see the wood grain through this black paint. I think this looks so gorgeous. It's just plywood. Once I had those together, I wanted to add some little feet to the bottom part of the tray. So I got these from, I believe they're from Walmart. They might be Hobby Lobby, but I'm pretty sure they're Walmart. But it came with 2 different sizes, and I used the smaller size, used the Waverly wax again on these, and then just hot glued them in all 4 corners of my tray. So then I'm taking a Dollar Tree vase, and I'm not going to paint it or do anything. I'm going to leave it clear like this. This is going to be our pillar in between the 2 tiers. And then I'm going to take some boxwood that I got. I think this is from Hobby Lobby. I just cut a piece off of the pick, and I'm going to put that down in the center, and that's going to be the center of our tray. I really love the way this looks. I don't think I've seen many trays like this, so I really think it's different. Then I'm just taking my E6000 and hot glue. You don't want to mix the 2. If you're going to do this for the long-term, short-term hold, you want to make sure you leave gaps in that E6000 and only put your hot glue where those gaps are, or you're going to break down the bonding properties of the E6000. So then I'm just going to glue my vase on to the top tray where it needs to go. I let that set overnight. Well, no, I did glue it onto the bottom, but for some reason I don't think I filmed that. I don't know why, or I lost it. Something happened, who knows? That happens in all my videos. But anyways, I wanted to take these stamps that I got and add my initials. This is something my husband does. He does woodworking and makes wood flags. So he always brands the bottom or the back of his flags with his initials. I mean, he does it with iron and literally burns it into the wood. I'm not gonna do that with these little projects, but I thought it would be cool to just add my initials onto the bottom of my projects here. And here's how the tray turned out. I absolutely love the way this looks. I think it is so different, and I haven't really seen ones created in this way. So let me know in the comments, what do you think of this small tiered tray?
Melted down a few Dollar Tree candles and saved the jars to create some cute little bud vases. First, I need to clean out the remaining wax residue, and I used my heat gun to do that. This remelted the wax and allowed it to drip down to the bottom, and then I just wiped it out with a paper towel. So for this first one, I grabbed my polymer clay and rolled it out, not paying much attention to the shape of it. I just want to make sure that it's thick enough to hold its shape. Then I cut it down into a thin strip and applied it to the side of the glass jar. I've been seeing a few pottery designs like this on my Pinterest feed lately and wanted to give it a shot. The clay sticks pretty well to the glass on its own. I do go back and add some glue here in a little bit, but I wanted to get all the pieces on first. I pinched the outer edge of the clay all the way down to start creating that ripple look. Once I got all the pieces on, I'm taking this Sculpey oven bake adhesive and added it all along the edge of each clay strip. Not too much, just enough to make sure it stays on the glass. And I kind of wiggled the clay a little bit to make sure the glue got underneath of it. Then I put the jar into the oven at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. Then you want to turn the oven off and let it gradually cool down inside. The next day, once the glass was cooled off, I painted everything in this sandy blonde color by DIY Paint and gave it 3 coats. When painting glass, you want to let each coat fully dry before adding that next coat. Otherwise, you'll lift up some of that previous paint layer. Now, I was debating if I wanted to leave it this solid color or add some white wax to it, and I landed on adding the white wax. I always scoop out a little bit of the wax onto a popsicle stick, that way my brush doesn't contaminate it or get any of that colored paint into the wax. I added the white wax to a few sections and then wiped it off with a dry paper towel. Let me know in the comments, which version did you prefer, the solid tan or with the white wax? I really like how it looks with the wax.
So we're going to be making a lantern here, and I am starting out with some of these shadow boxes from Dollar Tree. So I have a small one, I have a medium-sized one, and then I have 2 larger ones. And I'm just going to take off any like embellishments that they have, try to sand it down and get it as smooth as I possibly can to get ready to paint. And at first I started sanding this bunny one to get the glitter off, and then I was like, oh wait, just rip the paper off, it comes right off so easily. And then I thought I recorded when I was painting these, but clearly I didn't. Anyways, I just painted them in Mineral by Waverly, and I'm sure you all know how to paint. So next I had this bag full of shims that my husband had in the garage, and because they're like smaller on one side, thicker on another, I had to glue them together so that I would have one solid piece that was the same width the entire way down. But if you had like paint stir sticks or just like scrap wood or anything, I did have scrap wood. Honestly, I didn't feel like cutting it down. I thought these would be easier, but you could do that and completely skip this step. So once the wood glue had dried, I just took some wood filler, filled in all of those cracks so that these would look like one solid piece, and then just sanded that down. Again, I painted all of these things with Mineral by Waverly. I love this like taupey grayish color. It's so popular right now, and I love the way it looks. But then I'm gonna take my shims and I'm gonna glue them in like a 90-degree angle, and I'm gonna also put a bead of hot glue in the center to make sure these are nice and secure. So these are gonna be our corners of our lantern. Next, I'm going to hot glue these in all 4 corners. So you would need 8 stir sticks if that was what you were using, or 8 pieces of wood or whatever you were using for this. And I'm gonna glue these down to the top and the bottom. I don't know why I didn't paint part of these before putting them in. One of the videos that I had watched where I got my inspiration from, they didn't, so I thought maybe I shouldn't. I don't really know what the reason was. I think it was because of like the glue holding things together. It was a little easier to hold together not painted, but anyways, it ended up just being an extra step that I needed to do in the end. I've seen so many of these lanterns, and I'm going to show you a few of my favorites that I've seen recently here in a minute. But after you have the top and bottom squares glued on, or boxes glued on, then you're going to take your medium-sized one, glue it on top right in the center. I just drew a line in the center so I knew where to glue it. Same thing with this smaller one. We're just gonna like stack them up on top of the lantern. I also do add a little finial on top, and I don't think I recorded that part either. But now I'm just going back in with my Waverly, painting up all of the outside parts that I did not originally paint. And then I thought it was looking a little plain. I was gonna leave it here, and then I was like, no, it kind of needs something else. So I took this assorted dowel rods that I have from Walmart, and I took the square ones because my lantern is a rectangle. It's more square than it is round. So I'm taking these square ones and I'm going to cut them down to fit on the top and the bottom of my lantern. And I put these about an inch up on both the top and bottom. First, I just cut them down with my miter shears. And like I said, I put these an inch from the top, an inch from the bottom, and I just drew a little line so I knew where the top of my dowel rod was gonna go. And I know my head keeps getting in the way here. I love this added detail. It definitely gave it a little something extra. I wanted to make one of those lanterns, those really large lanterns that you see at Hobby Lobby, but those things are like $150. No thank you, I am not spending that. But here's a look at 3 of the most recent and ones that I've seen and that I really love, that I got inspiration from for this piece. And here's a look at how mine turned out. I absolutely love this. I think this is by far my favorite project on my channel. I just absolutely love the way this turned out. But let me know in the comments which one of these was your favorite, and I'll make sure to link all of the inspiration pieces below.
This project, I'm taking a Dollar Tree mirror and removing the backer as well as the mirror so I can paint the frame. Before painting, I did give the surface a scuff sand so that the paint will stick better. And I gave it a coat of Heirloom White by Rust-Oleum, but for some reason the spray paint was not drying and just stayed tacky, so I ended up going in with Drop Cloth by Dixie Belle. Next, I found this paper-like reed stuff at Dollar Tree last summer, and I've never seen it since, which is unfortunate, but I know you can find this stuff at other craft stores. I cut down several strands to start adding loops around the frame of the mirror and used hot glue to attach it. I did one layer with the loops right next to each other, and then did a second layer of smaller loops overlapping in between the larger ones. Next, I'm taking these half wood beads. I got these from Amazon and will link them below for you. I know these are not Dollar Tree, but Dollar Tree is selling wood bead packs now, so you can use those and cut them in half or use them as is. When adding wood beads to a project, I like to leave a small space between each bead. That way, when you get to the end, if they don't fit perfectly, it is a lot harder to tell and less noticeable. Where if you glue them right up against each other, you will see an obvious space at the end. Next, I put the mirror back on, but had to glue it down with popsicle sticks because of the paper spline, but that's it for this one. It was super quick and easy.
Next project, I just took these 5-gallon paint stir sticks that I got from Walmart, and I'm just taking some popsicle sticks to hold them together. Don't ask me why I cut these popsicle sticks down. It was not necessary. I really don't know what I was thinking there. But this is the back. I did just paint the front with my antique Waverly wax. So once that's glued in place, I took a piece of burlap that I have and I cut that down to size, and again I am just removing some of these threads to make it look a little more rustic. Once I have this frayed how I wanted, I did just hot glue it down in place, making sure to use my little silicone thing there, don't know what it's called, so I don't get burned. Then I'm taking this little house I found from Dollar General. I removed the hanger and the roof, and I'm taking this same floral scrapbook paper to put on top of the house. And I just used my finger to make an indent of where I needed to cut out. I did just do the same thing here as in our other few projects where I Mod Podged the paper down, let it dry, and then sanded off the edges. Once that's dry, again, I'm taking my Waverly wax to distress the edges, and I did it a little more heavily on the house here. I also wanted to distress that little metal tin roof. It was a little too shiny for me, so I took my antique Waverly wax along with some cinnamon to give it a rusted look, and I love the way this little house has turned out. Next, I'm taking one of these sunflowers that you can find at the Dollar Tree, removed the stem hanger part, and I did give this 3 coats of white paint. I didn't think you needed to see that part. And then once that dried, I'm taking some dark gray paint and just giving the flower a little dimension. And I wasn't too concerned about being overly perfect here because I do go back over it with some white chalk paint just to make it look a little bit more worn. After I was happy with how this flower looked, I'm taking some of these wood letters that I had in my stash from, I think these are from Dollar Tree, and I'm taking the letters that spell out homegrown. And I just paint these with my green moss colored chalk paint from Waverly, and then I do slightly dry brush the edges with my white chalk paint. I'm not a huge distresser, so I thought this was perfect for my liking. So I thought I was done with this flower, but I thought it needed a little bit more dimension and detail. So I took my Waverly wax once again, and I am just distressing the very edges of all of the flower petals. I did slightly go over the centers of the petals as well, and I think this was the perfect touch that it needed. So I glued some Jenga blocks to the center of this. I should have just used those little square block pieces that the Dollar Tree has because the Jenga blocks didn't actually fit down in that center dome piece there, but I just put a ton of hot glue on. It worked out fine, and then I hot glued this down in place along with my little home sign that I wanted to be in the background, and then put the flower on top. And the finishing detail I added here was some little gold thumbtacks that I wanted to make a little more rustic as well. So I took my antique Waverly wax and the cinnamon for that. And that's it for this project. I think this is so cute and something that you would find at like a little boutique shop, and it is absolutely my favorite from today. I'm taking 3 of these shadow boxes from the Dollar Tree, removing the little hanger part from them, and then also taking my X-Acto knife just to run it along the edge and then be able to push that backer out away from the frame. Next, I'm taking some burlap that I have and just cutting it down to size. So we're going to cover the backs of these signs because the front, I didn't want to worry about having to paint it and all of that, and the burlap looked nicer against that back background. So I'm going to cut it down and then just fray the edges by pulling off some of the strings around the sides of the burlap. Next, I'm going to Mod Podge this burlap down to the sign. So I put a pretty good layer on the bottom, placed down my burlap, and then I'm just covering about a half an inch to an inch around all 4 sides of the burlap. I didn't cover the whole thing. I didn't think it was necessary. This worked out just fine, but feel free to cover the whole thing if that's what you prefer. Next up, I found these mini cups from the Dollar Tree, and you can see that they're a little bit smaller than even the smallest terracotta pots that the Dollar Tree carries. You could have really used either one of these. I thought the plastic cups were a little easier because I wanted to cut them in half, and my husband was not home to help me cut the terracotta pots. But I love the way these ones turned out anyways, so I'm just going to give them, I think I gave them 3 coats of the ivory chalk paint. And then I also painted my frames with the ivory chalk paint as well so that it all had the same cohesive look. Then I'm going to distress all of my frames. So using that same technique, I'm using Fawn, Mineral, and then my Antique Waverly Wax to give this a nice distressed look. And for the Antique Waverly Wax, I really just focused on all of the corners and the edges of the frames. I don't think I showed this part, but next I just glued the backer onto the frame itself, and then I'm taking the little cups, hot gluing them right down into the center of my burlap backer. So you can see there I painted a little brown stripe with my fawn color. I thought it was a little too dark, so I ended up going over it with just a very light coat of my ivory chalk paint to tone it down, added some lavender into my cups, and that's it for this one. What do you guys think? I think these are absolutely adorable. I think those cups actually look like they could be like vases. I think you could distress them or add a little bow. I decided not to do that because I like the simplicity of how they looked as they are.
This project is so easy. You can make this in 10 minutes or less. I got this oval serving tray from Dollar Tree and wanted to turn it into a background shelf sitter for my bookshelf. I wanted to paint it and scuffed up the surface with a high 400 grit sandpaper for the paint to stick better, but also so I don't scratch the surface. Then painted the tray in cottage white by Folk Art and gave it 3 coats, drying it with my heat gun in between. That is what took up the most amount of time. And sorry if you can hear the rain, it has been pouring all day here. Next, I'm sealing it with my Dixie Belle clear coat. I'm going to add a transfer and it won't stick to just the painted surface. You have to seal it first. Now for the transfer, I wanted to try these ones from Dollar Tree on that brown paper. I heard they weren't as good as the other Dollar Tree transfers, so I cut out one of the flowers and then burnished it onto the tray surface. I'm not sure if these transfers were meant to be a little softer and worn looking, but that's how it turned out here, and I actually really like this look. It was exactly what I was going for. I did try this on glass as well, and it turned out perfect on the glass, so I think it just depends on how you use it and what surface you use it on, but either way, I liked it. Next, I took my bronze gilding wax and rubbed it on the edges of the tray, and that's it for this one. Like I said, super quick and easy, but I love how it looks layered in on the bookshelf.
I'm using these wooden planks from the Dollar Tree and then these tongue depressor craft sticks from Amazon. And the Dollar Trees near me don't have those little wooden houses, so I figured I would just make my own. It really wasn't that hard. This is probably the hardest DIY in this video today. I don't know. You guys can let me know, but I tried to keep these all really simple, and I think that they are. But anyways, I'm just going to cut off the curved edges of my tongue depressor sticks, and I'm going to make sure it's the right length that my square board is, and I'm just going to glue one on either side of my plank so that it creates that box, that like 3D box shape. I'm going to glue those down and then take the second square plank and glue that right on top. And I'm ridiculous in getting every last little bit of glue that is showing off. Oh my gosh. I think the hardest part about this will be the next little part that I do in getting that roof peak part. I just had to cut some of the sticks down at an angle, but I really didn't think it was that hard to do. So for the roof, the outside peak, I'm using the giant giant craft sticks that Walmart carries. They're those really, really large ones. And I just cut this down again and glued them at an angle on top of my house. and here's how it's looking. You can see there's little ledges that come over the side, and I had every intention of making the roof lines go all the way down to that, and then I forgot and I started gluing them on, and then it was too late. So I do end up just cutting that part off. But I'm just taking some more of these tongue depressor sticks from Amazon and cutting them at an angle so that they will fit perfectly across the roof. And it gives it kind of like, I guess, that shiplap look. I don't know. Probably not, but you could say it is. Wood planks, I don't know. But I just cut down all of the sizes to fit all the way up and make that triangle roof. Next, I'm going to take this vanilla colored paint from Craftsmart. I didn't want it to be a stark white, so I wanted it to be like a little bit of like an off-white color, and this was perfect. You could also use antique parchment. That was another one I was debating on using, or ivory from Waverly, whatever you want to use. So then I just used my Cricut and cut out the words, "Let's stay home," because right now that's all we can do anyways. But I do love the saying, and I wanted to make this tray be really like comfy, cozy, homey, and I think I really achieved that look. So I'm just going to use my T-square to make sure this is lined up all nice and straight. And at first I thought I had the words up a little too high towards the roof, but once it's on the tray and it all came together, I think it is the perfect placement, because if it was too low, some of the word home would have been covered up. So this looks great, and I really love the way this turned out. You can still see on the roof lines there that there's those two peaks off to the left and right, but when you see the final project, you will see that they are no longer there. So I just took the bottom of my word home, lined it up on my T-square so that it was nice and straight, added it to the home, and that is it for this one. I love the way it looks. You can see there how I removed those extra little parts hanging off, and I think this is just so simple and cute. And here we have to pause for the pity because he had to be around while I was filming as usual.
Had these adorable MDF Monstera leaf wall hooks in my stash for at least a year, and I saw Tina Lee here on YouTube create this cool carved wood look with them. I wanted to give this a try for myself. I painted all 3 Monstera leaves in the color lichen, and at first I left the hook piece on, but later removed that. This Fusion Mineral paint actually smells really strong. If that bothers you, you might want to stay away from this brand. Like I said, I ended up not wanting to keep the peg look, and it popped right out super easy. But now I have a hole in the Monstera, so I filled it in with some joint compound and let that dry. I did have to add a few layers of the joint compound because it was such a deep hole and the joint compound shrinks as it dries. Once it was dry, I lightly sanded and then repainted over that area, which I guess I didn't record, but you all know how to paint. Okay, now for the fun part. Well, I thought it would be the fun part, but it was really tedious. I picked up this wood carving toolkit from Hobby Lobby. I only ended up needing the one small curve tool, but I thought these other ones might come in handy someday. I've heard Dollar Tree sells wood carving tools. I've never seen them in my stores, but Tina Lee used the Dollar Tree tool in her video. Next, I took my pencil and drew an outline around the whole leaf about 1/2 of an inch from the edge. Here's what the small curve tool looks like. It's just a little U shape. I'm going to use this to lightly carve all along the line I just drew. Really, all I'm doing is removing that paint layer on the leaf to see the wood through it. I did not carve too deep. This took a little bit of practice to get used to. I was pushing way too hard and trying to carve too deep right off the bat on this first one. I was also going back and forth over that same line, trying to dig deeper. The tool works much better if you remove shallow layers at a time. Go all the way around that outline once and then go back over it if you want it to be deeper. It is way easier on your hand that way, but I also learned it was easier to push the tool away from you. You want to move that leaf to keep your hand moving in the same direction. rather than trying to move and bend your arm to flow with the leaf. Once the outline was done, I drew a few circles to add the fenestrations that you'd see in a real Monstera leaf. I made sure one of the circles was covering that joint compound filled section so that it wouldn't look different if I carved out that area. Then again, I took my carving tool and outlined those sections. After that, I filled in the whole leaf with little carved out lines. I wanted them to flow with the leaf and not put too much thought into where each line went. I started carving out all the leaf edges first and then worked my way around the leaf and inward toward the middle. I thought that would be the best way to make it flow nicely. So I had 3 leaves and I was going to just hang them on the wall as a little trio. But then I decided to take one of them and turn it into a little riser. I had the 3 peg hooks that I removed and thought they would be perfect little feet. But they had that little nub on the top. Oh my god, how many times can I say little? So I grabbed my mini table saw, which I love so much. I should have used this in last week's wall art video on those dowels. But anyways, I cut the little top off of the pegs. You could also use a miter box or a miter shears to do this. I glued the feet on with my wood glue super glue and let that dry. And then I painted the bottom and the feet with a brushed gold acrylic paint. I just love how this turned out.
This next project is the easiest in today's video. So I'm just taking these 3 wood planks that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I'm painting them with my beautiful agave color from Waverly. This is the first time I'm using this color and it is gorgeous. So I'm actually painting the back, which is not necessary. You're not gonna see this, but I thought it would give it a more finished look. And then I did want the sides to kind of have a little pop of color for what we're going to do. Next, I'm taking this beautiful scrapbook paper that I got from Hobby Lobby. I didn't even realize it was double-sided when I brought it home. I thought I was just buying this like feather polka dot side and then realized there was the florals on the back. So I end up cutting this out and using 2 of the like feathery looking side and then 1 of the floral side. Then I'm just going to take my Mod Podge and just like we did with the wood fence at the beginning, I'm going to just put a layer down, put my paper down, put another layer of Mod Podge, and then let that dry. Once it's dried, I end up taking sandpaper to this one rather than taking my X-Acto knife to cut it off. I wanted it to have a little more of a worn look or torn look on the edges of the paper. And again, I am taking my Waverly Antique Wax and we're just gonna brush this all over the edges. Next, I took these tumbling tower blocks. I painted those with the agave color as well, and I'm just hot gluing them to the back. I just added this to give a little dimension to it so it wasn't so flat, and I also needed something to screw these coat hooks into that we're gonna add on to the wood planks. The planks are very thin, so you definitely need something to attach the screws to. So I'm just gonna line this up with where that block is on the back, screw it into place, but you wanna be careful here because that wood can split very easily. I just took my time. I almost did split this first one, but it ended up working out just fine. And here's a look at how it turned out. It was so simple and so cute. I love how this looks. It is so boho farmhouse, which is so my style, more my style, I guess. But you could just hang your keys on it, hang up a picture, hang up a plant, whatever you wanted to do.
The project is nothing new, but something I still wanted to create. So I'm making a tissue box cover for my bathroom, and this one's going to require a few packs of Jenga blocks. I'm gluing 6 rows of 5 blocks together. However, I want the rows to be staggered. So I glue 1 row of 5 full blocks, and then the next row had 4 full blocks and 1 block cut in half with 1/2 on either end. And then I glued the rows together. For the short sides, I used 3 blocks and again staggered them. You can see the rows are not all the same length because, as we all know, Dollar Tree products are not all created equal, so to fix that, I used my miter box again and cleaned up the edges. Before adding the top of the box, I glued the sides together, that way I could make sure it was big enough to fit around my tissue boxes and easily slide off and on. For the top, I glued 16 blocks in a row, long sides together, and I made 2 pieces like this. For the opening, I added 3 blocks to the ends going the opposite direction. You could leave the box just like this and be done. I wanted to add some more detail, so I painted the box with watered down burlap color paint by Dixie Belle. I wanted to still see the wood grain through the paint. I wanted to give the box a little bit more depth as well, so I added my DIY dark wax. Just the tiniest bit was all it needed, and I used a baby wipe to apply it. That way it wouldn't get too dark or streaky. For one last detail, I'm taking this IOD rub-on transfer Painterly Florals. This transfer is so beautiful. I used the lavender pieces along the front and partially around the sides. But I wanted to make the transfers look like part of the box. So I took my X-Acto knife over each line of the blocks, and now the tissue box is complete. Picked up 3 of these gift boxes from the party aisle, and I painted the top inside of them with a couple of coats of gesso. I only wanted to cover up where that color was. You're really not gonna see the inside of this at all. Then I grabbed some of these peel and stick wall decals. They're kind of like wallpaper or a backsplash, and I got them in 3 different designs. I'm gonna trace each of the edges of my boxes. Now, I don't need to trace every single edge, only the ones that are gonna be visible because I'm gonna be gluing all 3 of them together. Then I cut out the sections where I needed to that I had traced. I tried not to cut too closely to that line. It's okay if it overhangs the edges a little bit. I actually prefer that. That way I can go back later on and clean it up. Dollar Tree has several different versions of these peel and stick tiles, or even different types of stickers where you can get the same effect. So go for the color scheme that best matches your style. Then all I need to do was peel that backer off, and I placed each of my little tile pieces on the sides of the box. So you'll end up having 2 boxes with 3 visible sides and 1 box with only 2 visible sides, unless you decide to make this even bigger. Then I cleaned up the edges with my X-Acto knife. here's how it's looking so far with the 3 designs that I chose. Next, I took my hot glue and adhered all 3 boxes together. I didn't realize it at first, but I should have bought 3 of the exact same type of box. One of them is slightly bigger than the other 2, which is so frustrating when it comes to Dollar Tree products, but that's okay. I just took my white gesso paint and tried to conceal it a little bit. Like I said, you aren't really gonna see the tops of these boxes once we're finished. I'm simply adding in some floral foam, covering the top with rocks, and adding a few succulents for a summery feel. But you could add in your favorite flowers, greenery, or whatever matches your style. This project, I am taking 5 of these tumbling tower blocks or Jenga blocks, and we are gluing them down together in a row. I started out using my wood glue, but pretty quickly ended up switching over to my hot glue just because I wanted to keep moving along with the project and didn't want to wait for that glue to dry. But for a longer term hold, I would certainly stick with the wood glue. And we're gonna make 4 sets of these 5 blocks. Once you have your 4 sets of 5 blocks, then we are going to create 10 sets of 2 blocks, again, just gluing them in a row, just like you see me doing here. Once all of the glue dries, we're gonna start assembling. So I'm taking one of these 2 block sets and then one of the 5 block sets, and we're gonna create like a little L here. You can see I started adding in my hot glue and mixing it with my, not mixing it, but putting 2 lines, and that didn't really work. The wood glue kind of canceled out my hot glue and I had to reattach this whole part. But we're gonna be making a little rectangle and then adding the top right here with the second set of 5 blocks. And we're gonna create 2 of those rectangles. Now I'm going to add my sides, and I started out adding 1 block at a time. I would recommend that you create the 10 sets of 2 blocks at the beginning. That way when you put the top on, everything lines up together. I ended up having to play around with the side posts a little bit because they were not perfectly straight the way that I had glued them. Next, we're gonna take the second rectangle that we made in the beginning and we're gonna add it to the top of our little post that we just added, creating this like rectangular box. And what we are making is actually an open terrarium. So next I'm gonna have to add on the roof, and I wasn't really sure how I was gonna do this at first to get that slanted triangular roof. So I took this multi-pack or variety pack of dowels that I have from Walmart, and I just took the smallest size dowel in that pack, and I'm gonna use that on the edge on both sides of my roof, and that way I can then slant my blocks so that they can create that roof peak. And I'm just gonna cut my dowel down to size here and then hot glue it down right at the very edge of my blocks on both sides. Now we're gonna take those remaining 2 block sets, and here I'm gonna start adding in my hot glue, and you want to make sure you hold this in place at an angle until that glue dries. That way it doesn't start to fall over on you and it's going to hold that position, which you can kind of see here. I know it's a little bit out of frame, but then I'm going to add that second one on, and I do this 4 more times, adding all 6 of my 2 block sets on top of my roof. Then I did fill in any gaps between that dowel and the block with my hot glue just to make sure the structure was going to be nice and sturdy. Next, I'm taking one of the larger, I think this is the largest size dowel in that variety pack. I'm gonna cut this down to size as well. I ended up using my miter box for this one because my miter shears are pretty dull and I really need to get a new blade for those things. Once I had that cut down, I'm gonna use this to just kind of cover up where these blocks sit together, and I did glue them together at the top first just so they wouldn't move around on me while I was trying to add that dowel in place, and then we're going to attach the dowel to the top. Next, I just gave it a really good coat of the Mineral Waverly chalk paint. Now, you could do so many different things with this project. I wanted to keep it minimal, but you could add on rub-on transfers, do decoupage with some napkins, make it colorful, whatever fits your vibe. But that's it for this one, and I absolutely love the way it turned out. But what do you guys think? Also, during my living room makeover, I bought this pole wrap and didn't end up using it. So today I realized this would be perfect for creating a circle shelf. Apparently I'm trying to see how many ways I can make a circle shelf. Is this number 4 now? I think I'm losing track. But I just need to cut it down, and I want the circle to be 4 inches wide. When cutting pole wrap with a power saw, you want to leave it rolled up, and you do not need a power saw. This material is super easy to cut with a miter box as well. So I cut the wrap down to 4 inches and did that 3 times because of the size piece that I was starting out with. So to make sure all 3 pieces are the exact same size, I take the first cut and lay it directly on top of the next section that needs cut. And then bring my saw blade down and make sure it butts right up on the piece on top. This will make sure your pieces are cut perfect every time. In my opinion, this is way more precise than measuring. Next, I'm taking 2 of the large wreath rings for the form, and at first I was going to line the outside of the rings, but realized I would need to cover up the edges of the wood, so I decided to use the rings as almost the edge binding for the pole wrap. So I started gluing section by section using my Starbond super glue. I'm almost out of this glue. I use it so much, and I glued 1 wreath ring on either side of the pole wrap. There is a paper-like material on the back of the pole wrap, and it's like a purplish color. I wanted the inside to match the wood a little bit better, so I painted it with Burlap by Dixie Belle. For the shelf, I'm cutting down one of the Dollar Tree longwood signs. I have not been fortunate enough to find one of the blank wood ones, but I did find some of the Easter ones. And these are super easy to cut down. I did hold the sign up to the circle to see where I needed to cut, and then scored the board a few times on one side, bent it in a little bit to see the fold, and then cut along the other side. I did have to cut it lengthwise as well since it was a little bit too wide. Now, to hold the shelf in place, I decided to add dowels. I have some serious RBF going on in this video. Oh my gosh, I must have been very focused. But once I had the shelf level, I drew a line so I knew where to glue it down. Next, I'm taking this faux leather ribbon from Dollar Tree and cut 2 pieces to the same length, and then glued them together for more of a high-end look. I tried using tacky glue at first. I thought that would work really well, and I didn't want that lumpy look that hot glue leaves, but the tacky glue just absorbed right into the fabric and did nothing. So I ended up using my trusty Starbond glue. Now I just need to attach the leather strap to the pole wrap, and I used these bronze upholstery tacks, and that's it for this one. For this decor piece, I took inspiration from this vase or planter pot I saw at Target in the Studio McGee new line. I love the texture on it, and I knew I could easily recreate this using things I already have lying around. Now, I know this Dollar Tree planter is not the same shape, but I still think it works to get that overall look. To start out, I'm going to take this acrylic gesso. I've never used gesso before, but I see a lot of art channels do that, and I really liked it for adding a primer base to a project, and will definitely continue using this. The outside of my planter got 2 coats, and I gave the inside one really light coat about 1/3 of the way down. Next, I'm going to use this shelf liner, which has the exact same texture pattern that was on the Studio McGee vase. At first, I was going to wrap it around, but realized that didn't really work so well. So instead, I cut the liner into 2-inch strips. Then using Mod Podge, I started applying the strips. The shape of this vase causes them to overlap a little bit in order to cover the whole surface, and the last strip I only added on the top half to cover that bare section. This can be the back that no one's going to see. Once the Mod Podge was dry, I wanted to wrap the top of the shelf liner inside of the pot. This wasn't working well at first, and what I realized I was doing was adding too much Mod Podge and not allowing time for it to get tacky and hold that strip down. Since the pieces folding over are so tiny, it really needed that tack to stay in place. After this layer is dry, I'm taking ivory paint and gave the vase 2 coats. To get that glossy look that the Studio McGee piece has, you could add polyacrylic or a spray sealer or even Mod Podge. I used a gloss Mod Podge, and that's it for this one. This project turned out so adorable. I am obsessed with it. I started out gluing 2 blocks end to end and then glued 2 more blocks directly on top to make all 4 sides the same width. And I made 4 sets just like this. Next, I'm taking a single block and adding it to the middle of the 4-block set. Then gluing all the pieces together to create a square. This is going to be the base for a little stool. Once the glue dries, I'm taking wood filler to make the sides look a little bit more seamless. This step isn't necessary, I just hate how uneven these blocks can be. Apparently I didn't record it, but I painted everything white, and then I'm taking this hexagon wood piece from Dollar Tree to use as the top of the stool. I was debating leaving the stool top natural wood or painting it, but I ended up painting it white also. Next, I'm taking this mandala stencil that I have and adding it to the top using a tan paint. And that's it for this one. I think it is just so adorable. I want to make more, but I can't find any more of these hexagon wood pieces in my stores. Someday I will find them again.
Next up, I'm taking these square carpets, don't mind my pajama pants there, that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to take my E6000 and glue them both together. I really wasn't sure if this E6000 was going to work holding them together at first, but it worked really well. I can pick this thing up from one end, the middle, wherever, and those 2 carpets are stuck together and not going anywhere. So at first I was gonna keep this that like dark navy blue color, but I was going back and forth, decided I would rather have it black. So I just took it out in my garage with this Rust-Oleum spray paint. It is a gloss, but you really can't tell because this is a carpet that it had a gloss finish. And I just spray painted the whole thing, giving it 2 coats. Next, I'm taking these letter stencils that I have from, where did I get these ones from? I think I got these from Walmart. They're pretty large. Actually, no, I think I got them from Joann's. Joann's or Michael's, one of those places. But yeah, they're pretty large, and I just started with my C because we're gonna spell the word welcome, and that was the middle letter, and I stuck that right down in the center of where my 2 carpets met so that I would have my word perfectly centered. I hope that makes sense. I think I explained it a little bit weird. But anyways, I'm taking my ivory colored chalk paint, and this is a Dollar Tree stencil brush. And again, I'm just dabbing up and down, not rubbing, and then you will not get any bleed through. So to make my letters nice and straight, I am using a tape measure. This is a really tiny baby tape measure. I love this thing. And I just placed it across the bottom and made sure my letters line up on top of it. To give this a nice clean look, I did just fill in where there's those little spaces on the letters so that it looked like one solid letter. Next, I cut out these little lemon stencils from my Cricut, and I wasn't sure the best way to go about like figuring out how to add it on here. So I cut out a lemon with a leaf on it, and I kind of just like put the pieces down that I didn't want in different colors. As you can kind of see there, I added the leaf so I didn't get that part yellow. And then I'm taking a makeup sponge again, and I'm dabbing all over. So then to fill in the leaf part, after I went all around the border with my lemons, then I put the lemon piece of my cutout and then dabbed on my green leaf. I hope that makes sense. You can see what I'm doing. But then I wanted to add some more detail to these lemons because they look just kind of like blobbish right now. So I took some more brown paint, added a little stem, and then this I think is the perfect detail to make this rug look high end and like I bought it in the store. So I'm just taking some black paint here, outlining my leaves and making sure there's like a space between the leaf and the lemon. And I think this was the perfect detail. And then I just added a black little line down the center of my leaves. Last, I'm just going to spray this with a waterproofer because this will be out on my front porch for the summer. And what do you guys think of this? I absolutely love this. Lemons are really trendy right now, and I am so proud of the way this came out.